Marinaro, Shaun, Starr. It's the Sick Podcast, and you can listen to us on all social media platforms, including our Instagram account, and the handle is at the Sick Podcast. We've had a lot of great shows, Shaun, but none are going to be better than today's. I would imagine it's a huge pleasure joining us right now, one of the premier insiders in all of professional sports. He's one of the premier NFL insiders in the world from the NFL Network, Ian Rapoport. Good afternoon. How you doing, bud?
What's going on, guys? How are you?
We're doing extremely well. Thanks for doing this, man. So I look you up on Twitter, and I know who you are because I follow you religiously, and you break all kinds of stories, so you're candy for a guy like me who's in the biz. 2.4 million followers. For the benefit of those watching this podcast and listening, how does a guy named Ian Rapoport go from nothing to 2.4 million followers?
Very, very slowly. Very slowly. I mean, it was, I don't know what I thought this would end up being like, but I never thought it would be like this, right? So I was a newspaper reporter in New York. I was covering high schools part-time. That was the best job I could get out of college. And I thought I was pretty good, but who knows? And I was lucky enough to get a job. I was willing to move. So I was lucky enough to get a job in Mississippi, covering Mississippi State for the Clarion Ledger. And that was like the beginning of a decade of like really slow, methodical climb. And it wasn't about Twitter followers because they never existed then. Twitter wasn't alive. It was really just like keep trying to report and keep trying to inform and keep trying to cover the biggest thing you can, the most important thing you can for the most people. And it was, for me, it was Mississippi State, and then it was Alabama for the Birmingham News, and it was the Patriots for the Boston Herald. Then NFL Network called out of the blue and wanted to hire me. And it was still like the strangest moment of my life. But that was pretty great. And I never wanted to be on TV. I never sought after it or anything. And it's all very surreal.
It's amazing, right? How things generally work themselves out in that sense, right? Like you talk about the willingness to move, the willingness to make a sacrifice, the willingness to, relocate yourself in order to, make a name for yourself and see if you can make it in the business, right? And then obviously, you go from Mississippi, you talk about Alabama with the legend that is Nick Saban, right? And I'm curious if we look back at that connection from your time covering Alabama, dealing with Nick Saban and what had to have been an intimidating environment. Like what lessons and how did that prepare you once you started to work for the Herald and began covering the Patriots, right there in the dynasty with Brady and Belichick? How did the Saban relationship get you prepared for Bill Belichick and dealing at the NFL level in that kind of environment?
Yeah, I mean, in a couple ways. So the most important lesson I learned about Nick Saban is you don't have to be friends with the people you cover. And not that Nick and I were enemies. We were not. I mean, there was a year when we were not. We were sort of butting heads a lot. But it doesn't matter because my job is to get the information, to report it accurately and honestly and transparently, taking all matters into consideration and reporting all sides of it. But when you come up in this business, you sort of like, I want to meet relationships. It's going to be nice. And it's, everything's going to sort of be friendly. And at Mississippi State, it was very friendly. At Alabama, it was not friendly sometimes. Right. But it was my job to report what was there. And a lot of times it involved NCAA violations or, how are you going to bring this many players in on scholarship, or this guy left the team, or this guy got arrested. I mean, it's just, the transition was hard. And I covered it well, probably better than I did when I was friends with everyone at Mississippi State. That's a really good lesson. You don't have to be friends with everyone to report the news. And then I think the other thing was, Saban cut down a lot of access. You couldn't get to assistant coaches. You could barely get to players. And I still reported a lot, and I broke a lot of news. How do you report news when there's not a lot of access? Mm-hmm. How do you figure out the truth when they don't want you to know? Those are very important things. The kind of lessons you learn take you through all the way.
It's building relationships. That's what it is. If the coach doesn't want to talk to me, I got to find someone that will, right?
Yeah, and it's fine. And one of the things, the other thing is like, I report sensitive or quote unquote negative information all the time. And Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. It's what it is. When it's the truth, no one can say anything. And that is an unbelievably important lesson. The truth sets you free. So what I try to do is I try to let people that I'm reporting on know, hey, look, here's what I got. Do you have anything to say? Do you want to contribute? Do not. I'm just giving you a heads up. And if it's the truth, they could get pissed, and sometimes they do. They can't really get pissed because it's just true.
Ian Rapoport from the NFL Network on the SIG Podcast. You can follow us wherever podcasts can be found. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you're following us on Instagram and Twitter, and of course Facebook as well. You can follow Ian on Twitter at RapSheet. Don't forget, every Sunday on the NFL Network on NFL Game Day mornings at 9 a.m. going into Week 14. No doubt, Ian, COVID-19, man, has absolutely wreaked havoc. What about how the league has handled COVID and the pandemic, going through struggles through Tennessee, obviously what happened with Baltimore and the 3-time postponement of that game between them and the Pittsburgh Steelers? I mean, you got to tip your hat to Roger Goodell and the league for how they've handled this. I'm honestly shocked that we haven't seen a prolonged period of pause other than just game postponements.
It's never been about pause because, I remember when free agency was going to happen. It was late middle of March, and pandemic was just happening, and people were like, they shouldn't have free agency, just pause. If they had paused, when would they have restarted? When would you have had the draft? When would you have had training camp? I honestly don't even know. So the NFL was like, we are just going to do this as safely as possible. Change the rules on physicals. Do it as safely as possible, but do it. Same thing for the draft. It's like, well, you can't have the draft. Actually, you can. It just has to look different because the world is different. So it was virtual. It was remote. And it was different, and it worked. And I think the same thing for the season. Like, you don't have to pause the season. You just have to do it safely. You have to figure it out. And the NFL and the NFLPA spent months laying out these incredibly strict protocols, and they adjusted them throughout. Now, I mean, everyone's in, everyone's sort of in intensive protocols now. Practice is different. You have masks, but it's what it is. Just be safe, get through it, have the games. I think it's been unbelievable what the NFL and the NFLPA working in partnership have done to keep this thing rolling amid a pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things you said a couple of minutes ago is you don't have to be best friends with the coach. And I'm wondering what your relationship was like, Bill Belichick. Now, I've been in the biz for 18 years. I never had a chance to interview him. Unfortunately, hopefully that day comes one day. Maybe yes, maybe no, maybe not so fortunately, but when I watch his press conferences, I have to tell you, Ian, I find that I almost feel sorry for the members of the media that are in that room because he's not overly cooperative and he doesn't give them all that much. How difficult did you find it covering him? He wasn't the most exciting. He wasn't the most revealing. He wasn't the most friendly. He was pretty moody. What was your relationship like him?
I really liked it. I mean, yes, the press conferences you see are not always fun. After games, he's not usually very good, except if he loses sometimes he gets kind of thoughtful, but usually press conferences, post games aren't good. I learned more covering Bill Belichick about the business of football, how to put together a roster, how to build a program, how to handle things financially. It's unbelievable. I feel like that education set me up to do what I do now, where I spend a lot of time covering contracts and the finances and the business, all of that. That's important. When I needed him one-on-one, I could almost always get him. Press conferences, you're not going to get a lot. One-on-one, he would tell you. And one thing about Belichick is sometimes if you ask, he will just tell you whether you like it or not. He and I mean, I would say we have a good relationship, and I really enjoyed covering him. It's always going to be kind of on his and the team's terms a little bit just because the access isn't great. But he also has been in the business 40 years. Like, he understands the reality of it. So you report something that's quote unquote negative, like he knows.
Yeah.
He knows. So I really liked it.
Well, it seems like it goes back to something you touched on, at the beginning of this interview, Ian, when you talk about building relationships and building trust. I always got the impression, only through the camera lens and through one-on-one interviews, through networks like the NFL Network or others, that Bill always came across as a no BS, no nonsense kind of guy. And I guess if you're talking about building credibility for yourself as a journalist and establishing these relationships, I would guess that Bill would be able to pick up on that, which I guess takes us to the Rams game. And I know we're taping this with you ahead of their kickoff on Thursday night when they play at LA. Huge game for both teams. Are you surprised that Bill has helped guide this team with Cam Newton, a run-based offense? They lean so heavily on the run attack here that they've managed a 6-6 record. What were your expectations about this team without Brady in their first year?
I knew it was going to be a year in transition. I mean, they are getting right with the cap. I mean, look, any team that has a franchise quarterback is going to go through this. Saints are going to do it with Drew Brees whenever he leaves. You're going to have the dead cap money that's going to basically follow you for a year or two or whenever, right? You're going to have the money follows you. So they had to get out from under that. So this year was going to be a little bare. They also had the opt-outs, a lot of opt-outs. And yeah, I mean, it's I thought they would be good and competitive. My guess was 8-8. That might be what it ends up being. They also could sneak into the playoffs. Bill Belichick is an incredible coach. He did not become a great coach because he happened to coach Tom Brady. So I knew they would be good. I knew it would be a transition year. If they could sneak in the playoffs, like, he might win Coach of the Year, honestly.
I think you're right. I think if they get in, very quietly, they've won 4 of their last 5.
Yeah.
No one's paying attention to them, and here they are creeping up on everyone. And now they have a losing record on the road. They're 2-4. They're going up against the Rams team, 4-1. I think they're playing their biggest game of the season here, because if they win tonight and they still have the Dolphins and the Bills, that's going to be one very motivated team to play against, and I wouldn't want to play. And you know what? They're an average team, but they have a great coach, like you said. If they squeak into the playoffs, I wouldn't want to play the New England Patriots because I wouldn't want to go up against Bill Belichick.
Yeah, I mean, and that's when, he's really at his best. I mean, we really saw an incredible example last week. The Chargers aren't good, but they had never been beaten like that. I mean, they got one of the fun young quarterbacks in the NFL, and Bill Belichick made him look like he was anything but. He is a great coach. I would hate to face him in the playoffs, just really hate it. And we'll see if they end up squeaking in there.
Ian, you talked earlier in this interview covering a lot about the business side of the National Football League. And obviously, America's team, the Dallas Cowboys, have a mammoth-sized decision at hand. And how they come to that decision, considering Dak Prescott's season-ending injury that he suffered at the hands of the Giants, I believe, if we go back to week 5, right? What do you think the outcome is going to be there in terms of, obviously, the contract? Does it come from Dallas? And what's the size going to be in your educated guess?
I'm not sure it's that big of a decision, honestly. I mean, to me, he's going to be the franchise quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys. I don't see him going anywhere, nor should he. I mean, they're a good team with him. They're a bad team without him. It's pretty clear, right? Like, I think he's one of the best young quarterbacks in the NFL. I've always been a fan. To me, it's really like, and they've offered, they offered a ton of money, $35 million a year. I mean, it'll be more than that now, probably up near 40. It's really, the difference wasn't money. It was where the Cowboys wanted a 5-year deal and Dak wanted a 4-year deal. That was what it was. So, are the Cowboys willing to bend on them this time to get the deal done? We'll see. But it's never about if they're going to do it. It's more like how and when.
With one of the premier insiders in all of professional sports, Ian Rapoport of the NFL Network, right here on the Sick Podcast. Ian, a lot of people have been looking at Carson Wentz over the last year and saying something's off here. What's going on? Is it head coach Doug Peterson? Is it the Philadelphia Eagles? Is it the offensive line and the million combinations they've had? Or is it Carson Wentz? Mm-hmm. Doug Peterson now has benched Carson Wentz. He's replaced him for Jalen Hurts. Tell me how you see this all ending.
Well, I mean, Hurts is going to start on Sunday. If he wins, I imagine he'll start again. I figure he's going to get, probably a couple starts at least. If he's terrible, which I don't expect, but if he's terrible, then probably Carson gets a start at the end of the season. The real question is, like, what do they do after the season? If you look at the money, always follow the money in the NFL, right? So they cannot cut Carson Wentz. They just can't. $60 million dead cap charge with a cap that's going to go down. You can't take that on. So it's either do they keep him for the following year and see if you can fix him, whether it's Doug Peterson or a new coach, possible, or do you try to trade him? If you trade him, then it's really just who thinks he is a starter. If someone knows, is willing to bet on him being a starter, then a deal could get done. That could happen. But they'd have to pay, $25 million for Carson Wentz. You have to know for a fact he's going to be your starter and he's going to be good. I'm skeptical about whether or not that's the case. But either way, I mean, it's the worst. And even still, then the Cowboys give a $30+ million dead cap charge. So either way, it's probably the worst of all situations for Philly.
No, it's. I mean, contractually, right? The money if he's off the roster next year, the year after that, I mean, it's financially crippling, right? And good luck, Jalen. No problem. Just got that Saints defense to tangle with as you get set to start in Week 14 for the Philadelphia Eagles. I know there's there's lots of love in the AFC, recency bias with how hot the Buffalo Bills are. I know. You reported earlier this afternoon extensions already to Sean McDermott, and now their general manager as well. Looks like the Buffalo Bills are well set up. Ian, everyone's in love with Josh Allen. I mean, if we're looking at the Kansas City Chiefs as the creme de la creme in that conference, who's the bigger threat? Is it Buffalo, as hot as they've been?
Or you're talking this year?
Yeah, we're talking this year, or the Pittsburgh Steelers are now battling injuries as well.
I don't know. I mean, I watched the Bills the other night, and man, they look great. I mean, I don't. You do this long enough, you sort of stop getting impressed by things or wowed by things. Watching some of those throws Josh Allen made, I was like, woo. Mm-hmm. I mean, off balance, going to his right, a dart 30 yards down the field along the sideline. I'm like, man. And what's interesting too is like, I'm not sure I got that Josh Allen from the beginning. Like guys who are not accurate in college don't always project well to the NFL. Well, he has. I mean, the Bills were right a million times over. They were right. And now, I mean, think about the Bills now. They don't cap-wise, they're not killed. They have a quarterback in a rookie contract. They have their coach and GM on extensions. Things are looking pretty good if you're the Buffalo Bills. I mean, that is a fantastic position to be in.
Yeah, they're a fun team to watch on offense. I mean, you got Cole Beasley to match up with. You got the best route runner in the game, and Stephon Diggs. You got the cannon.
God, Diggs is so good. He will. I mean, how about that trade? Because look, you give up a number one receiver. That's tough. Well, then the Vikings drafted one, so they get out from under Diggs' contract. They draft his replacement, who's almost as good. Like everybody, that was a great trade, and everybody wins.
Another couple of minutes with Ian Rapoport, the producer of this show. Is a huge Tennessee Titans fan. So I have to ask you a question about the Titans because everyone loves their offense and everyone loves Derrick Henry, but they give up 10 points. Can you begin to explain to me how they don't have a true defensive coordinator? And is that going to come back to bite Vrabel?
I don't know. I mean, they may not have a true defensive coordinator, but it's a good enough program where I would say they're probably okay. I mean, I would imagine it's like the Patriots thing where you have a play caller, but you don't have a true coordinator. Then next year you promote him. Maybe it's like that, but I don't know. I mean, I think, probably more hurtful for the Titans is the fact that they signed two guys for, more than $20 million total who are not going to play for him anymore. Vic Beasley and Jadeveon Clowney, who they were supposed to give, huge presence off the edge. Neither are on the field. That probably hurts them more than whoever their defensive coordinator is. I would say that, but I still think they're a good enough team to get into the playoffs and do some damage.
Yeah, it's going to be an outstanding final 4 weeks of the NFL regular season as we push towards the expanded playoffs. Ian Rapoport, follow him on Twitter at RapSheet. Don't forget, you can watch him every Sunday on the NFL Network on NFL Game Day morning starting at 9. As we move to Week 14, I have to ask you, as huge as you are, I need to know how competitive it goes, man. Like, if you see Shefty on the streets or if you see Glazer on the streets, are we throwing down? Are you guys chummy? I need to know what it's like between the big boys in the business.
Yeah, I mean, we're not throwing down. It's not like that. Like, I mean, at least from my standpoint, like I don't have animosity toward either of those guys. They've both been very respectful to me, and I feel like I'm respectful to them too. I mean, we compete hard. Don't get me wrong.
Sure.
For everything, but when someone else breaks a story, credit. You just know that it happened. Like, no one tries to shoot anyone else down. It's very, very competitive. It is intense every day. but it's not disrespectful at all. So, if I see, Schefter at an event, Mike will go up and say hello. I'll see Glazer go up and say hello. Like it's cordial and fine. We're just not best friends.
Cool. The beauty of professional sports is we witness stardom and we witness superstars, but fans keep on asking for more and they always want to see the next guy. I'll put you in the spot a little bit. We'll only probably have the answer to my next question in about 15 years. Is Patrick Mahomes, in your opinion, going to have a better career than Tom Brady did?
I mean, how many Super Bowls does Brady have? 6.
Mm-hmm.
Hard to imagine anyone else winning 6 Super Bowls. But individually, I mean, stats might be better. He might be a better quarterback. But, the Chiefs are awesome. But to do it continually, win 6 Super Bowls in 20 years like the Patriots did, like we may never see that again in NFL history.
How dare you ask that question? He's Tom Terrific. How dare you ask that question? Great answer, Ian. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay, wrapping up here. If the Kansas City Chiefs don't win the Super Bowl, who, in your opinion, will?
I would say the Packers or the Bills would be my kind of 2 where I could see, or the Saints. That's a lot of teams, but I would say those 3 are kind of the ones I'm thinking. I mean, the Saints have been kind of up and down, not great, and they still win every week, it seems, with Taysom Hill as their quarterback. I mean, when Breeze gets back healthy in a couple of weeks, I think they'll be great. Bills are heading in the right direction, look like a really good team. And the Packers, Rodgers playing better than he has in his career. So I think those would be my teams if it's not the Chiefs.
And Packers a good pick too. I mean, Adams is heating up, and I'm gonna go out on a limb and suggest he's gonna be an absolute beast in the final month for these guys starting on Sunday for them. I expect a big win on Sunday afternoon.
What a pleasure this has been for us, Ian. We're not going to keep you any longer. We could go on all day, but we know how precious your time is, and you're on with so many people because you're so much in demand. I want to take this opportunity to wish you all the best during the holiday season, bud.
Thank you, guys. This was enjoyable. Have an awesome holiday season. It's been great hanging out with you guys, and I'm sure we could do it again down the road.
And we appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Cool. Awesome, guys. Take care.
Ian Rapoport, insider extraordinaire of the NFL Network. I'm Marinaro. He was Shaun Starr, and this was the Sick Podcast. You can follow us on all social media platforms. Check out our Instagram at the Sick Podcast and follow our Facebook page. Like it and share it with your buddies. Shaun,
dude,
this next time.
Dude, how awesome was that?
It was awesome.
Come on.
It was awesome.